Yeah, I know I've not been very active. That's nothing new. I'll explain everything at the end of the video, but for right now, I want to talk about stakes. What are stakes? Put simply, stakes are the centerpiece of your conflict. They are the thing that provides your conflict with substance. They are the whole reason why the conflict exists at all. Without them, the conflict in your story is nothing more than an illusion. It is a fight that doesn't need to happen and it only is there because there has to be a fight in a story, I guess. And then all your audience really needs to do is come to that conclusion, and then suddenly everything starts falling apart. Stakes are fundamentally important to maintaining your conflict and keeping it substantive, because you really can't have a conflict without stakes. At least realistically anyways, because if there's nothing at stake, then there's nothing to fight about. Stakes exist to give the audience a comprehensive win-lose outcome for the conflict at hand. Like, what do the heroes stand to gain by winning? How do they achieve that? But also, what are the consequences of losing? What happens if our heroes don't do the thing that they're supposed to do? And what about any other parties involved? What happens if they don't do the thing that they're supposed to do? And there's a lot that can come from just that thought. There's a lot of engagement that can come just from knowing these things in your mind as the events play out, because they keep you engaged in what is going on. Like, you don't watch any kind of sport not knowing how it's played, right? Because, like, how boring would that be if you were just watching a bunch of people that are fondling around with balls, that are kicking and throwing that are kicking balls and throwing Fuck. But, like, if you don't know what the heck is going on, like, even if you know who's going to win, what, like, winning or losing is, if you don't know, like, how you get there, it's like, why are you gonna stick around? I'm really bad at these analogies. Fuck. I don't feel like there's really a lot of stakes that are in Ice Queendom, or at least not a lot that are made clear to us, and I feel like that is part of the reason why I'm not latching on to Ice Queendom, even as much as I did to RWBY when it was in its heyday, and I didn't really like RWBY that much, and I guess I'll just talk about what I mean. So, I watched the first couple episodes in, and it's just Volume 1. It's, like, beat for beat. It's all just Volume 1. Like, sure, there's some differences. We get introduced to the show's new OC, Do Not Steal, and the new type of Grimm that will basically be the main conflict, or the source of the main conflict here, called Nightmares, which manifest in people's dreams. But besides that, it's just Volume 1. Now, let's not, like, get too deep into like quality and stuff, since I just want to talk about Ice Queendom's problems with stakes, rather than getting too deep into just anything else. Let's suppose for a minute that I am just a regular RWBY fanboy who just loves RWBY, especially Volume 1. So I don't need to comment on that. Instead, let me paint a picture for you. If you're a fan of Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, My Hero Academia, or some other shonen of the type, this will probably be very easy to explain to you. Imagine for a moment that a new movie for said shonen came out, and its placement in canon is, somewhat questionable, but it can still exist on its own. But now imagine that they spend a sizable amount of time just recapping the events that you already know about. That not only sounds like a complete waste of time, that sounds insultingly patronizing. Are you not expected to know all this already? Like, who the hell is going into RWBY Ice Queendom before they've seen RWBY at all? And, like, I know this doesn't technically have anything to do with the stakes of the show, but I think it's important to note, because part of the reasons why it becomes harder for the anime to really establish the stakes that they could have is because they waste so much time on stuff that we already know. But let's be charitable here. We don't know if anything in these episodes is going to come back later. Maybe it'll become important. still wouldn't change anything, I guess. But the point is, we're here to talk about the latest episodes. We still have like another 6 episodes to go. I think it's 6. I don't actually remember. So, but now we're finally getting into what the show is really about. Adventures in Weiss's Palace. Persona 6 Ice Queendom Revelations, featuring Ruby from the Ruby May Cry series, and Knuckles. So our heroes have to find the Grimm inside Weiss's dream, and they have to find it before... well, we don't really know when. Obviously, there is a time limit. They can't just take however long they want. It's very obvious that there will eventually be a point when, Weiss will just not be... but we have no concept of how long that time limit is. The one thing that this whole conflict is about, saving Weiss, and we don't even know when the cutoff point is. The whole point of establishing stakes is to engage the viewer by making the consequences of the conflict presentable. If you're only going to imply they exist, it's barely more than not even really having them in the first place. And I mean, to be fair, there is stuff at stake. There are risks. Weiss is very clearly going to die if nothing is done, but it's hard for there to be any real kind of tension from the perspective of an audience member before we actually know anything about what's going to happen. Now, to be fair, in the most recent episode that came out, it was revealed, finally, that after they go in this next time, they need to be very careful, because now, if they don't do anything, if they aren't able to be successful, then Weiss may actually be in danger. What does that mean exactly? Will they only have this one final shot for them to do this? We still don't know. What is the cause of this new danger? So, does going in there more times increase the danger, the more times you go in there? How does that work? It's we don't really know. And I mean, at least we're told something about it. Halfway through the goddamn anime, we're literally on episode 6, and we are finally told some idea of how much time our heroes have, really, and the kind of limitations they really have to be able to do all this. But whatever. Surely there's other ways to establish stakes, right? Our heroes could die after all, right? Sorta, kinda, not really. Ruby gets her ass handed to her by Weiss the first visit, but she is immediately pulled out of the dream by Cold Steel the Hedgehog over here. So if there's ever a time when our heroes are in danger, so long as Shion Zaiden isn't asleep, Ruby, Yang, and Blake could always just be pulled out of the dream pretty much whenever things get hot. Are there consequences to doing this? Backtracking, maybe? Kinda. They don't go back to where they died, but they have these doorways that can teleport them to any other doorway that they've been to before. They can only lay down a limited amount of them due to these little coins, which they also have a limited amount of. Okay, alright, so there's, there's more limitations here. They're not just invincible, but they can be replenished in between missions, and the doors stay up even when you're booted from the dream. Now again, from the most recent episode, it is revealed that these things can be destroyed, and all of them were destroyed on their second boot from the dream. How are they destroyed? Did Weiss find all of them and, single-handedly send someone to destroy them all? What exactly happened? What caused I don't know. Even just with that alone, we're kind of wondering how much can Weiss and her goons interact with these doors, and how much can they destroy them? But, we don't know what caused all the doors the first time to get destroyed, so we still don't really have a clear understanding of the stakes. We know that these things can be destroyed, we just don't know... we don't know how. I mean, I guess Weiss can come along and break them, but how were all of them simultaneously destroyed last time? We don't know that. Even though there are stakes, there's so much stuff that we don't know to really maintain the tension of the situation. And also, like, the fact that it's only established halfway through the anime, again, that these things can be destroyed, it almost feels a little, too little, too late. We know what the conflict is, but we don't fully understand the stakes. We know that there are risks, we just don't fully understand a lot of the stuff that is important to know about them. Under what exact conditions would they fail? Sure, the Grin kills Weiss, but then when does that happen? How long until that happens? With almost no chance of dying, and they have such easy access to locations that they've been to, it wouldn't really matter anyways. What am I to be invested in? Now, I'm being very charitable when I say this. We still have 6 more episodes, so we have time to make things more interesting, and like I said, episode 6 has made the stakes slightly more tangible, albeit they are still somewhat transparent. But perhaps I'm not really making it clear what exactly I'm looking for when I say that I think that this anime is kind of lacking proper stakes. So I want to talk about, to contrast it, I want to talk about another anime that I've been watching recently that I feel handles its stakes excellently, and unlike RWBY Ice Queendom, it is able to get everything that you need to know to be invested in the threat and the danger of the story in the first 5 episodes. Summertime Rendering is probably my favorite new anime I've come across this year, and if you haven't seen it, go do that. Do it right now. It's a fantastic show. It's not finished airing yet, but I will try to keep things relatively spoiler-free. I am going to be going over the main points in the first 5 episodes, so at least watch those first. Please, this is a really good anime from what I've seen so far. Summertime Rendering is about a guy named Shinpei who is returning to his hometown on an island where he grew up to attend a funeral for his childhood best friend Ushio. He finds out later that she was killed by a group of shapeshifters called Shadows that can turn into anyone and mimic their personalities perfectly. And then, after being killed by one of these shadows, he finds out that he's in Groundhog Day, and he will rewind time after dying, and he figures out that he has to use this new ability for him to figure out how he's going to stop these shadows and save everyone else on the island. Of course, that's not that is barely scratching the surface of what is required of him. There's still a lot more that you learn in the next 4 episodes, which mostly just serve as an introduction to the shadows as Shinpei observes them over the course of the next couple days. He learns that they have superhuman feats and reflexes, but they can be killed. They can mimic other humans perfectly, memory and all, as well as all of their belongings, and they can do this by flashing them, kind of like a camera. We don't know yet how to differentiate them from the original, but we know that there is a way. He learns that, in fact, he learns this from a mysterious woman that he met briefly in episode 1 that seems to know a lot about these shadows and may be the key to fighting them. He also learns that not all shadows are malicious. By the end of episode 3, he finds that Ushio's shadow is not only alive, but actually thinks it is the original Ushio, and helps him escape from the shadows at a pretty dire moment in episode 5. And that's not the only thing that she's done. It's implied that she was the one who gave Shinpei the power to rewind time, but we still don't know much about her or what her motives are. And I guess speaking of motives, regarding the other shadows, according to the myth of the shadows that were circulated around the island, shadows target families and replace everyone in their household with other shadows so that they can grow. It's also implied that they're responsible for the disappearance of one other certain family that Shinpei knew. But that's not their end goal. On the night of the 24th, when the island's summer festival is going on, seriously, go watch it right now if you haven't. Like, I'm being fucking for real. I've already told you more than I probably should. The shadows they massacre everyone at the festival and unleash a gigantic shadow that swallows everyone on the island. That is except for Shinpei. The shadows find out shockingly quickly that he has the ability to rewind time. And they do everything in their power to keep him from killing himself because they know that if he goes back in time, he might, try to stop them. But with some help, he manages to go back in time. And finally, and this is the big kicker here, by the time that Shinpei has died and went back in time, it's been his third time dying and coming back. And each time, he's come back at a later time than the last. So even though he can go back, there is a cutoff point. If too much time passes, he won't be able to go back and change something that he didn't get the chance to. And since shadows can find out what he's capable of, we know that there's a chance that they can stop him and keep him from using it until after it's too late. And holy fuck, that's not even the half of it, but I'm not going to talk about that. Within the first 5 episodes, we already have everything that we need to understand the stakes of the conflict, and then some. We know what the bad guys are capable of, we know what they're trying to do, and how they're going to do it, and exactly when. It's going to be 2 days from when Shinpei first got there, on the 24th. And even though we know that they're very strong, we also know that they're not invincible. There is a chance that they can be stopped. The power that Shinpei has is strong, but it's not without limitation. There are risks, even with the power to rewind time. And, this is especially true because the shadows kind of seem to know what this thing is, considering how quickly they figure out that he has this. And the fact that they can read his mind by copying him, just by flashing him, is also incredibly dangerous, because it means that past versions of shadows can also figure this stuff out. And again, that's not even the half of it, goddamn, but I can't talk about that. We have everything to set the conflict for the rest of the story, and then some. Besides what's at stake, there's still so much that we don't know about what's going on exactly. Where did the shadows come from? Why do they want to eat everyone? Why is one of them on Shinpei's side? Why does she want to help him? Why does it think that she's Ushio? What was on Ushio's phone that was left to him? Who's this mysterious woman? How does she know so much about shadows? How is she so good at fighting them? And why does she introduce herself as Shinpei's favorite author, who is actually a guy? Is she a trap? All of these questions will be answered as the story progresses, and it's not like we only have questions for the first 5 episodes. We're still given plenty of answers to be able to understand stuff. It's not like we don't know anything. We are given enough to feel invested, but there is still much more that makes us want to keep going, and that's discounting all the stuff that I just talked about, the setting of stakes for the conflict. All of it is to entice you to keep viewing, to keep reading. They do so much with a concept that really isn't that original, and it's a show that I want to talk about more in some future videos. So, again, go watch it! In fact, I'd argue that Groundhog Day is a trope that's used more in Japanese writing than in the West, or at least in anime and the such. It's not something unfamiliar, and yet they still do so much more with the first 5 episodes than RWBY Ice Queendom. They do exponentially less in the same time frame than what they have at their disposal. And so often, the conflicts feel so fake, and it's not even just because of the fact that our heroes can't die. They literally get captured, and the guards don't even take their fucking weapons. Like, that alone could have been stretched out into, like, its own little mini arc where they have to get captured for them to get closer to Weiss, but ultimately it means that they are going to be throwing away their weapons, and then Blake has to catch up with them. She has to figure out how to free them, and that in of itself could also be like a little side mission where she has to figure out how to open this door, because it's a person. It's not just something that you can just pick the lock on. It's sapient. You could have like a moment like in Alice in Wonderland where you got to talk to it, figure out, maybe even solve a riddle or something. Maybe it requires her to go to some place to figure out something about Weiss, and we get to explore this area and learn a little bit about Weiss herself. Like, there's just so much more that could be done, even within 5 episodes. My problem with RWBY Ice Queendom isn't that there aren't stakes. There very clearly are things at risk. Our characters have limitations. There are things that create the conflict in this story. My problem is how these stakes are established. And establishing stakes is just as important as having stakes at all, because a story that waits until the last minute to establish its stakes, up until that last moment, is indistinguishable from one that doesn't have any stakes to begin with. What I like so much about Summertime Rendering is that it uses its time so wisely, whereas RWBY Ice Queendom meanders into stuff that we either already know or waits until halfway through the goddamn anime to give us a more tangible understanding of the stakes that were already simply implied. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Ice Queendom, and I guess now I might as well talk about why I haven't really been uploading. I have been making videos, it's just that I've kind of had a problem where I would finish a video, and then I would look over it and I would think, I don't want to upload this, and it's sort of just gotten... It's a really bad habit that I've developed, and I feel like I really shouldn't care so much. If you're wondering why I described episode 6 as the most recent episode, that's also why, is because this was another one of those videos that I was just kind of holding back on until about a week passed by, and yeah, now episode 6 is no longer the most recent episode. I know, and I'm probably gonna start uploading some of the videos that I've just been holding back on for a while, so hopefully for the next couple weeks, uploads will get slightly more frequent, hopefully. There's still some other things that I need to finish editing, and also just some stuff that I've really wanted to talk about, like Summertime Rendering. I've not felt this passionate about an anime since Great Pretender or 86, and I really want to talk about it, especially while it's still airing, because I don't feel like it's getting enough attention. This thing completely fell under my radar, and there's so much that I really like about this. But I guess, in conclusion, watch Summertime Rendering, have an excellent day, and stay platinum. Okay, but for real though, did anyone see that time? Less than a quarter of a second. Jesus.